Displacement is a really powerful tool in animation. It's so powerful in fact that it's hard to boil its use case down to just one function. It can warp objects, it can add texture, and it can be used to animate things in really interesting ways. In this video, I'm going to show you what it is and how you can set it up in DaVinci Resolve Fusion. Let's get into it. Displacement will let you warp the texture of objects by mapping them to something called a displacement map, which means there are essentially two elements to this technique. There's the actual displacement, which is handled by a single node in Fusion, and then there's the displacement map, which is kind of where the creative part of this comes in, because that can essentially be anything you want it to be. So here in Fusion, I have some text merged against a background. I'm going to come up to our effects tab here and search for displace and put this in between our text and the merge. So we're displacing the text before it merges over the background, but this won't do anything until we go through some other steps first. Now a really common technique is to use a noise generator as a displacement map, which I'm going to do here by bringing in a fast noise node and connecting this up to the green foreground input of the displace node. And just for clarity at this stage, the yellow input will handle whatever you want to displace, and the green input is for your displacement map. I'm going to bring in a second viewer here for our noise because it will be important to see what the noise looks like. I'm also going to pin the inspector controls for the displace and the noise nodes so that they both stay in the inspector window and we don't have to keep clicking between them. Okay, so as of just now, not very much going on here. But from the displace controls, if I bring up the refraction strength a bit, our text will begin to warp slightly, as you can see here. If I then, from the noise controls, start to bring up the detail, contrast and scale, we can begin to see the effect this is having on the text. This looks pretty funky right now, but let's break down what's actually happening here. In the displace node, our refraction channel is set to luma, meaning that the displace node is looking for the brightest, most luminous parts of the map. So the brightest parts of this noise here, and warping our text according to that parameter. By doing this, we're able to create some really trippy effects with our text here using the controls of this noise. So we could play around with the detail, we could play around with the contrast and the scale of the noise to create a really unique looking text. Something else we could do is we can also increase the seethe rate of the noise so that our text moves like this. So as of right now, we're displacing this in a radial pattern. So you might be able to just see here that the text is refracting more at the edges, and you can change the position of the radius if you want to go for a different look. But you can also set this up to work across the X and Y axis, which will give you individual refraction controls for both of those. So you could, for example, add refraction to only the Y-axis and make the text look like it's melting or something like that. Really powerful. You also don't have to just displace text. You can use this technique on any video or any shape that you want to. I found this particularly useful when I'm trying to create little subtleties and animations. So for example, in this scene, I'm using displacement on only the Y-axis, and that's sort of mimicking the feel of water as it's rising in this little chart here. One last example here, just because I think it's important to show this one. Displacement maps don't have to just be noise. It can be whatever you want, and in that sense they can achieve a lot more than I've shown you here. So in this example, I've set up a little vector magnifying glass, and it's running across this word here using some keyframes. But what I've done is I've created a second instance of this circle from the magnifying glass, which you could do by copying the node and holding Shift while you paste it. An instance is just an exact copy of a node with all of the original controls. So everything is controlled using one node, but you could just have various instances across your node tree to connect them in different places. Now with this instance here, I'm actually going to right click a few of the parameters and select D-instance, which will let me control them independently of the original one. And what that lets me do is set it up as a solid circle rather than just a bordered one like we have in the original. If I then feed this into a white background node now, it gives me this little white circle animating across the screen in the centre of the magnifying glass, which I can then use as a displacement map to displace our text with. and it gives us this sort of glass magnification effect across the text. If you've got some creative examples of displacement maps, let us know in the comments. I'm keen to know how many different uses there are. Or, if you want more Fusion tutorials, definitely give these videos a try. Remember to hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next one.